theme. Let's jump in. So, my friend Riley and I, we were trying to find directions to Buckskin Gulch, and we were lost, go figure. And a woman behind the counter at an information center, she pulled out a map and she detailed this 55-kilometer stretch of back dirt roads we would need to travel in order to get there. And so with directions in hand, we turned to leave, but the woman stopped us and she said to us, "You know it's dangerous out there, right?" Said, "If you don't bring enough water with you, you could die. It's hot, and flash floods can happen anytime out there." My friend Riley, trying to be funny, I think, said, "Well, if there's a flood, we'll just tread water until we reach the top." And this lady, in a hushed voice, she says, "Son, that ain't going to happen. If flash floods come, you're dead." Just last year, she said, 2 hikers were found dead in there with their skin torn off. Suddenly, she had our attention. The possibility of dying is one thing. The prospect of death by skin torn off, it rattled us a little, you could say. You see, Buckskin Gulch, it's a 13-mile-long slot canyon in Utah. It's one of the longest slot canyons in southwest United States. Some people think it might be the longest slot canyon in the world. And the width of the canyon is 3 to 8 feet, and the rock walls on either side can tower to as high as 500 feet. But what makes Buckskin Gulch incredibly dangerous, in fact, Backpacker.com called it one of the most 10 dangerous hikes in the U.S. What makes it so dangerous is that there's no way out. Once you're in, you can either go back or you can make it all the way through. There's no exit along the 13-mile route. Get caught in there when it rains, and, well, the woman went on to explain in rather gory detail, the wall of water that met these hikers must have been 20 feet tall, and as they were swept down the canyon, they bounced off the sides of the canyon, acting like sandpaper, and they were found without their skin. Needless to say, I didn't want to go at all. Not at all. And it didn't help that as we're driving down this 55-kilometer dirt path road, you could see the evidence of flash floods everywhere. There's debris fields. In some places, the path, the road is completely washed out. And what makes matters even worse is trailing us, behind us, is a rain cloud. In fact, in the distance, we can literally see it raining somewhere miles away. And as the road ended next to the sign directing us into the canyon, I protested to my friend Riley one final time. I said, "Caution should guide us here." But Riley persisted. He said, "Caution never gets you anywhere interesting." And with that, we were into the canyon, a narrow, sandy path between 2 large rocks. It marked the entrance, and quickly we found ourselves descending deep into this canyon. And as we're hiking down there, at first we're sort of confident. Any sign of trouble, and we can hike it out of here real quick. But after an hour of hiking behind us, and now several miles deep into the canyon, the awe-inspiring beauty of the canyon sort of sat alongside this constant anxiety. Here we were, completely helpless. If it decided to rain, the floodwaters, we were told, could rise to 20 feet in 2 minutes. Not exactly the ideal situation for 2 portly pastors who are out of shape to find themselves in, right? We were completely in the hands of the wilderness. We were at its mercy. It would do with us what it would. And then there was this moment. About 2.5 hours into the hike, we had surrendered our fate to the canyon, and here, miles away from anywhere, beside this large rock face, there was this canister box chained to the ground. Friend Riley spotted it. We opened it up quickly, and we found in there an official description of the 8,000-year-old petroglyphs that we had not yet noticed on the side rock walls. So excited, we began to navigate the wall looking for them. And then there they were. Right beside us, carved in the rock, was this depiction of a hunter with a bow. And at his feet was etched in stone this trail. And you had to follow it for about 50 feet, and it sort of went in this wave pattern. And we followed it around a large rock face, and at the end of the trail stood a group of large elk. Etched in stone was this primal story of a hunter dependent on the land for food, for survival, an 8,000-year-old piece of art depicting the human struggle for survival. A life lived at the mercy of the wilderness. And Riley and I, we sat there in silence, pondering this moment we found ourselves in. Here we were, the two of us, keenly aware, at this moment, at this time, the two of us sat at the mercy of the wilderness. If it rained, we were in immediate peril. And here we were looking at these 8,000-year-old petroglyphs depicting an ancient human at the mercy of the wilderness as well. I can't say exactly why, but this was an incredibly powerful experience for me. I sort of felt this kinship with the history of the human species. I felt as though I'd taken my place in this long line of human ancestors who have taken to the wilderness to find something. For this hunter, right, it was food, it was sustenance, it was life. Others have since come to the wilderness looking for the same thing, life in some form, whether it's visions or drama or excitement or adrenaline rush. I had come looking for it as well, and in that moment I had found it. Even if only for a second, the chance to feel connected to the earth and the long story of humanity and our connection to the wilderness. I had come to the wilderness this summer looking for answers from God, to feel small, to feel affirmed, to feel the hand of God in the wind, the rocks, the trees, the plains. To be honest, I went to the wilderness looking to hear from God, and I did. And the idea, the kernel of this season was born in the wilderness. You see, the wilderness, through human history, it has been seen as the place where humans come of age and where they develop and grow. Lauren Isley says this: "It's commonplace in all religious thought, even the most primitive, that the one seeking visions and insight must go for a time in the wilderness." The idea that wilderness and growth are somehow married together is as old as human culture. And interestingly enough, if you examine the life of Jesus, you realize that he had 4 wilderness experiences of his own. And I believe each of them coincided with a stage of development for Jesus, which sounds kind of odd. Jesus developed? Yes. I know some of us, right, in our belief that Jesus was both divine and human, that can sometimes be hard to get our mind around. But if you take the understanding that Jesus was fully human seriously, then surely he was developing, maturing, like all of us. And so for me, I've come to think of this. 4 times in the Gospels, Jesus has a wilderness experience, and he undergoes a development, a sort of progression in his thought, and they all coincide with the wilderness. Temptation in the desert, his escape by the lake, his mountaintop transfiguration, and his torment in the garden. And my whole premise for this entire year is this: if Jesus needed to undergo these developments, progression of thought, then probably we do as well. And so for an entire year, 40 weeks, we will meet together in this season, which the irony should not be lost on us. You always have to spend 40-something in the wilderness. 40 days, 40 years. We'll go with weeks. For 40 weeks, we want to journey alongside Jesus in the wilderness. So let me simply dive in and say this. This week, all I want to do is this: give you an overview of where we're going throughout the year. And then over the next 40 weeks, it's going to get interesting and odd as we go to some interesting places. But let me, for this morning, just simply take you into the wilderness of Jesus' experience, what I think it might mean for us. So, into the desert we go. Consider this. Why is it that both within our prison systems at home and when countries are at war and have prisoners of war, why is it that one of the tactics that's so often used is solitary confinement? Why is solitary confinement considered a weapon? I think the reason is both harsh and simple. Solitary confinement will break you. It doesn't matter how strong you are, it will break you. And essentially, this is Jesus' first wilderness experience in the desert with his temptations. It's an attempt to break him. Jesus arrives on the scene of his ministry, you could say. God speaks blessing on him at his baptism. And then immediately after that, Jesus is sent out into solitary confinement, you could say. 40 days in the wilderness. And during that time, Jesus wrestles with the devil. He wrestles with his own personal demons. So let me ask you this. Have you wrestled with the devil? Have you wrestled with your own personal demons? And I know some of us, because Nexus is a skeptic place, are thinking, I'm not even sure if I believe in the devil or demons. Fair enough, but don't miss the point here. Have you ever had one of those experiences where all those dark, suppressed voices inside are given opportunity to express themselves? Have you ever had a series of sleepless nights? Have you ever felt tormented by irrepressibly dark thoughts? Have you ever been driven to do something totally out of character for you? If so, let me submit you have wrestled with the devil and your own personal demons. I remember in our first season, our first year here at Nexus, after we've been going for a few months, I, in the wintertime, headed up to Kristen's cottage in the winter. And what I wanted was a full week, 7 days away on my own. And up at Kristen's cottage in the winter, it's so quiet. It's lonely. It's dark. It's cold. Quite frankly, it's miserable. There's an outhouse to use. I remember the first time going out there, and I couldn't pry up the toilet seat. It was frozen there, and then having to take an ice pick to do that. And then imagine sitting on that, right? Like, it was just miserable. And the thing is this, over the course of days living in complete silence, the external environment sort of became a metaphor for what was going on inside of me. I'd gone to the cottage looking for solitude and reflection, but I have to confess it was one of the darkest weeks I've ever had. I'm not sure I've ever experienced such a dark week of scary thoughts, bizarre psychological temptation, profound doubt about who I was, what I was capable of, what my life was about. In fact, I couldn't handle it. I came home after 5 days. I needed the distraction of everyday life because the voices, my own personal struggles, were getting too loud out in the wilderness on my own. The wilderness, you could say, it totally broke me that week. I wasn't ready for it. There's something terrifying about a week of silence alone with your inner thoughts, and yet so many of us, we never go there. And I know what you're thinking. Some of you here are like, I'm an introvert. Nothing could be better than a week away alone. But I'm not talking about having your own space or getting away for a week while you're still surrounded by distractions like books and beaches and fun. I'm talking about the terrifying work of going inward into the wild places of our own heads, pushing away the clutter, allowing ourselves to wrestle deeply with what is inside of us, what we're capable of, what is really driving me. Some of us will never go here. It's too hard, it's too terrifying, and yet the wilderness sort of calls to us. Come, and I will expose what is inside. Give the wilderness a chance, and you will come to believe in demons, even if only personal ones. Jesus went there, and I believe he's inviting us this year into the desert as well. Desert, wilderness, so we confront our own demons, our own fears, to examine that inner landscape. And so, this year, to the desert wilderness, we will go. This is Demons by Imagine Dragons. Where our demons hide, we're heading there. And next week, that will begin our journey, and Sigmund Freud will be our companion in the desert. So that's where we're heading next week. But Jesus has a second wilderness experience. You see, the Jesus who emerges from the desert after his temptation is the Jesus most of us love. The guy who performed miracles, taught a lot of good ethical ideas. This is the Jesus we all quote, all love. But Jesus has a second wilderness experience, and it marks the beginning of, I think, Jesus' next period of development. And it happens about halfway through his career around a lake. Jesus has, I think you could say, a bit of a meltdown, which I'm sure many of us can relate to, right? I mean, have you ever felt like running away? Like the pressure of life is feeling like too much, you can hardly function. Parents, do you not feel this perhaps every day? Those of you in relationships, you feel the tension rising, and perhaps, you're having arguments about stuff, and you realize, oh, this could go somewhere bad. I could say something silly, and there are those moments, right, when you're like, I just need to get out of here. Or those moments at work when pressure's mounting, work is piling on, the emails keep coming, and sometimes you're like, you know what, I just need to clear my head. I've got to get out of here. And this is exactly the situation we find Jesus in midway through his career around a lake. Jesus he's been playing the Messiah figure, pretty typical Messiah figure though. He's been doing healings, miracles, teaching on good morals and ethics. But Jesus' path in life comes to a head around the lake where he feeds 5,000 people. If you read the account of what happens in Matthew and Mark, you will know immediately before this event, Jesus gets word that John the Baptist has been killed. He died violently. John the Baptist was Jesus' cousin. His cousin. Presumably the one he grew up with, the one he learned with. And he hears this right before he's about to take the stage and deliver, presumably, a moving message. And you can imagine if you received news that someone you loved had just passed away, you might be fragile. And so Jesus takes the stage after learning his cousin has died, and he delivers the sermon. And immediately when he gets off stage, he's already feeling sort of on edge, a little frustrated. Immediately he gets off stage, and his disciples have a problem for him to fix. Hey, Jesus, we're in the middle of nowhere, and these 5,000 people, they're hungry. And Jesus, when you read the story, he comes across as irritated. He's like, well, then you get them something to eat. But we have no food. Well, then buy them something. We have no money. Oh, Lord. Really? Really? This is what you're putting on my plate right now? He's like, well, what do we have? Well, some boy, he's got 5 loaves of bread, 2 fishes. Fine, I'll take care of it. And then he does. And Jesus, presumably, he's emotionally exhausted, he's spent, he miraculously makes food for everyone. And when the crowd realizes what has just happened, they start to get a little rowdy. They are like, wow, if this guy can make food for all of us, we should make him king right here, right now. And then we see it. The crowds are pressing in, let's make him king, and Jesus just sort of snaps. And the tone in the story is kind of bizarre. Jesus is just suddenly, out of nowhere, like, whoa, I got to get out of here. Disciples, get in the boat. I'll see you later. Cross the lake. They're like, what? Weren't we going to go together? Just go. And he scurries off up a mountain on his own. And when Jesus reemerges on the scene after his second wilderness experience, something profound has shifted in Jesus' thinking and the way he behaves. There's a noticeable change in Jesus after this episode, especially if you read the Gospels chronologically. Gone are the moral teachings. Gone are the healings. Or when he does heal, he seems annoyed by it. On that mountain, something happened. What was it? What happened up there? What I would like to suggest is this: alone on that mountain, reeling from the death of his cousin who had tried to preach a kingdom of power and got killed for it, and in light of crowds trying to make him king by force, Jesus decides to leave behind the way of power. He decides his kingdom's not going to come through healings, and it's not going to come through great moral teaching or incredible signs. It's going to come through passive, non-coercive love. On that mountain, I think Jesus chooses love over power. And this has intense ramifications for virtually every aspect of our lives, domestically, relationally, personally, in our churches, our communities, our governments, around the world. How do we change the world? How? How do we change our lives? How? Is it through power or the non-coercive, passive way of love? And I think by the lake that day, Jesus made a decision to forgo power and pursue only the path of love. And this year, I want us to journey into the wilderness together to wrestle with that same choice. What's it going to be for us in life? As friends, as parents, as people in relationship, as people active looking for change in the world? Is it going to be by force, by power, or through love? I think how we answer that question radically can change our lives. So we're going to wrestle through that this year as well. The third Jesus has a third wilderness experience, and it comes towards the end of his life. He has, you could say, one of those mountaintop epiphany moments, his transfiguration. Hopefully, how many of you have stood on the top of a mountain? Right? Isn't there a certain clarity that comes with standing on a mountain? I remember my most profound mountaintop experience. Chris and I were dating. We decided to visit my brother out in BC, and we made this decision to hike up Grouse Grind, the Grouse Grind. It's Grouse Mountain. It's a mountain. We were going to hike it. And it is a tough slug. This is me at the halfway mark. Too far. There I am. That's me halfway up the mountain. And I was spent. Like I could hardly move at all. I had no idea what I had gotten myself into. And there I was at this halfway mark. I couldn't even stand. And I remember at the beginning of the hike, right, Chris and I were still dating, being the man, I decided I shall carry the backpack and the supplies for climbing the mountain. I remember I'm laying there, and my brother's just like, come on, man, you got to go. And my wife, who hadn't missed a beat, she was way further up the mountain, and she scaled back down the mountain, and there laying halfway up, she said, why don't I take the backpack for you? I'll carry it the rest of the way. I would have protested, but I had no choice. I could hardly move. And she took it. I remember we hiked for another hour, and it was I could hardly move. We finally got at the top, and I had this moment of epiphany. And the crazy thing is this moment of epiphany is captured on camera. This is when I had my moment of epiphany, up at the top of Grouse Mountain. Next slide. There we are, okay? This is my moment of epiphany. Now, why I decided to hike a mountain in khaki beige pants, I'm not sure. You can see how dirty they are. And what annoys me the most is look at Kristen. She's just smiling like she's Mary Poppins or something, right? Up a mountain we go, she got her umbrella there, whatever. But I had this moment of epiphany. It'd be saying, so clear to me. I must marry this woman. I must. If she's willing to carry me like that, I must marry her. That's when I decided I was going to ask Kristen to marry me. Interestingly enough, Kristen also had a moment of epiphany on the mountain. It was as clear as a sunny day for her. She said to herself, "If this weak, pathetic little man can't make it up a mountain and I must carry his backpack up for him, this must mean surely throughout the rest of life I'll be carrying his burdens." And it's true, and she thought that was okay anyway, and we got married, but she's been carrying my burdens for so long. But there, up on the mountain, it became so clear to me. And Jesus has one of these moments as well. It has this effect on him, and yet the story of Jesus on the mountaintop is so incredibly odd and bizarre. This is the story. I'll break it down for you. Jesus decides to hike up a mountain. He takes his three best friends, Peter, James, and John. They go up to the top of the mountain. There they meet Moses and Elijah, who apparently are dead, but not, because they're there. And then Peter says, hey, why don't I make a tent for you, which was apparently the wrong thing to say, because he gets all embarrassed. And then the whole thing ends, Jesus' face is shining like a light. And it's like, what? What is that? What exactly was happening here? I think our first clue is this. Again, something profound shifts when Jesus comes down the mountain. Three things I would say. The first is this. Jesus is no longer popular after he comes down the mountain from the Transfiguration. He's kind of like Nickelback, you could say. Everyone sort of wants to disown him. Nobody's like, I don't listen to Nickelback, right? Nobody, all of a sudden, all these crowds are like, we want nothing to do with you. And it's no wonder why. Because when Jesus comes down the mountain, he starts talking about his death a lot. I need to die. And the disciples are confused. What are you talking about? He comes down from the mountain and he starts talking about his death a lot. And more than that, he resolutely begins to head towards Jerusalem, the place he'll die. Jesus, you could say, becomes preoccupied with his own death. What exactly happened up there? What's the deal with Moses and Elijah? Here's what I think. Moses was the author of the law. Jesus said the law was summed up as love. Moses represents the path of love. Elijah was a prophet. Prophets were known for justice. Elijah represents the path of justice. Jesus travels up to the mountain, to the very pinnacle of love and justice. He comes to the top. And I believe what happens at the pinnacle is something happens, and it's this. Jesus confronts his limitations. He's fully lived out the way of love. He's fully lived out the way of justice. But on the mountaintop, Jesus realized that's only going to get you so far. Perhaps after 3 years, Jesus looks down from the mountain and he realized that no matter what he had done, there were still so many who were sick. The poor still suffered under oppression. Injustice still was running rampant. Perhaps on the mountaintop, he realized no matter what he did for love and justice, the world would remain broken. No matter what he did, the world would still be broken. And I believe on that mountain, Jesus realizes that to save the world, there's another path that had to be taken. He will need to die willingly. He realizes that the only path to salvation, the only path to life, is paradoxically through death. Now, the good news is we're all going to die at some point. But those who want to really live understand that you don't have to wait to physically die to find salvation. You can do that now, today. And you know, here at Nexus, I think our community is one that really strives to practice love and justice, which is good. I think a lot of us really work for that. These are the paths we must follow. These are paths we have to follow. Jesus laid them out for us. But again, on that mountain, Jesus realizes something important. Love and justice will only get you so far. At a certain point, the one to be traveled is the one of death. The key to this world being made right again is not necessarily love and justice, it's the willingness to die. Because you see, if this world could have been fixed by talking more about love and talking more about justice, it would have happened centuries ago. But what is really needed for all of us, for a world for us, is death and resurrection. And for us to develop like Jesus did, it's a path we all have to walk. We have to be willing to take up our crosses and say, I'm ready to die. That's the path Jesus lays out for us. And he realizes that is how my kingdom will come. That's how this world will be made right. And then finally, Jesus has one last wilderness experience. It's his most exhaustive one. So intense was this experience, we're told that he sweat blood. On the night before his death, Jesus, of course, he heads out to a garden, the Garden of Gethsemane. It's like a grove of trees. And on the night before his death, Jesus, there in the garden, his last wilderness experience, his faith fails him. His turmoil is one of doubt. It's his last challenge. He loses faith. Can he really trust God? Everything he knows or thinks he knows about God is in question. And his final stage of development will be simple, but frustratingly difficult, to simply trust. You know, one of the things I'm most proud of here at Nexus is that we've made doubt normative. It is the normative experience of everyone who believes. Doubt is good. Doubt is healthy. In fact, if you don't have doubts, I would say you're probably not being honest with yourself, but that's okay. We'll weed that out when we head to the desert wilderness and we do some internal work, so don't worry. But for those of us here who do doubt, what then? What then? Is there something beyond doubt? Jesus offers us, I think, a way forward here, and it's excruciatingly simple. Excruciating because it will require sweating blood. Simple in that it means simple and total surrender. When our faith fails us, when we're not sure what we believe or if belief is even important at all, when we enter the wilderness of doubt, on the other side of that wilderness is trust. That was Jesus' experience. There at the end, he had to simply trust. On the other side, I believe there's going to be something. And I'll lay my cards on the table this morning. The goal in this stage of development is not that we would have everything figured out or that we would have any or even all of our questions answered. My hope is that, though, by the end of this season, we can emerge from the wilderness having learned to trust more fully. I've got 40 weeks to make it happen. Ha! Right. Seriously. We enter the wilderness, that last final stage, and we're confronted with our own doubts. The question is, are we simply going to trust God's plan for the world? This is where I want to take us this coming year. I want to ask the band to come. It's going to take up all of season 6 from now till the end of June. And I'm hoping at the end of June, we could actually go on a big community wilderness experience in solitude, in some sort of desert of our own making within 20 minutes of here, something like that. And I'm hoping that we'll progress through. We have a lot of really neat and interesting things planned. I'm going to say more about this after the band plays, but I want to start handing out these envelopes. You can read them, and then would you mind start handing these out over here? We're going to have some interactive exercises all throughout the year. You'll get yours after there. If you wouldn't mind handing, that's going to squeal, all of these out. Let's do more here. Could you just pass those back up into the seats there? I'm going to talk about this after the band plays, but there's lots of interesting things coming this year, lots of interactive things. We're serious about this. We're going into the wilderness, a metaphorical one, but no less true. But this is where we're going. First, we want to confront our demons just as Jesus did. Second, we want to explore the path of love while confronting the primal nature within us that will insist on the way of power. Third, we want to explore the idea that to truly live, you must first die. And then finally, we head to the garden to sweat blood and learn the lesson of trust. My hope is that we'll emerge this year as a people who are willing to believe and hope that the path of resurrection for us, for the world, for all things lies through the path of trust. That's where I'm headed. That's where we're headed. I hope you will join the 40-week expedition. I'll have more to say about this in a second, but first, the band has some song for us, and anytime you undertake a wilderness journey of this magnitude, it's important to remember that we do not take it alone. We walk in good company. This is a path that has been taken for thousands of years by our ancestors, by those in the faith who have sought to grow and develop, and it's a path we will take as well. So these next two songs, I hope they remind you, we do not walk alone.
Take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn through the storm, through the night. Lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. When my way grows drear, precious Lord, linger near. When my light is almost gone, at the river we
Thank you, Grace and Band, and then such an important reminder as we begin this season together. We walk in good company. Like you need an excuse to get out into the wilderness and nature, but if you do, now you have one right here in your hands. Please, there's going to be more of these little things throughout the season. Take this, don't open it, don't ruin the surprise. Take this out on some sort of nature walk this week. Open it up, take a look at what's inside, and then, please, send me anything that you're willing to share from your nature walk this week. I'm hoping to you, if all of you reply, I might have a jammed inbox, but that's okay. Take this seriously. I hope you will allow this to become, for you, our first step in our wilderness season at Nexus. So, please, take this, open it, send me anything that jumps out to you. Even, it doesn't have to be profound, even if it's like, that was silly, I wish I hadn't have done that, send that as well. It doesn't matter. I'll take anything. Please. Okay? So, we'll meet back here next week. We'll be upstairs. Sigmund Freud will take us into the desert wilderness, which ought to be odd. And that's where we're heading. So let me pray, and then we can go from here in peace. God, thank you for the record, the story of Jesus' wilderness experiences and how those moved him, how you guided him in his development through those. And I pray that as we begin this year-long journey here at Nexus, that we would, A, be reminded that we walk in good company, but B, we would have the courage to take these first steps, and that we would grow and develop and mature because of it. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Go in peace.